Zapraszamy pana profesora Macieja Janowskiego.
Szanowni Państwo, bardzo dziękuję za możliwość wzięcia udziału.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. It's November. Well, November is mostly the month of Mondays, so it's important to charge your batteries in a place which is bustling with new ideas, because we're talking about avant-garde. So actually, considerations about modern architecture and art and history usually relate to the military origins of that name. Henri de Saint-Simon, he referred to that concept of creating new ideas. It's about experiencing the ephemeric being of avant-garde currents and entangling them with metaphysical methodologies, and that has been the share of those who lived in the 19th and 20th century. However, this is also true that identifying art with uncompromised avant-garde has become the operational base for many clients and recipients of art. And here two events come into importance, especially because they were of global nature. So the first one was a balloon, and the option of exploring the horizon and the landscape. The observer was pulled out from their position at a contextually built environment and was set above the architectural environment and transferred from the location experienced by senses and measured with flaner position and transported the isotropic space sense only with vision. Human field of vision expanded to almost divine perspective that enabled people to see much larger expanses of space, but then it also deprived them from the feeling of expanse. This way of perception of a city and landscape enlarged to encompass an overall picture of the built environment, but reduced to its visual aspects, became a perfect tool of planning and designing in the era of rapid industrialization that transformed entire regions. And then, in my opinion, the second event was the First World War, also played an equally important role for the avant-garde movement. It was a collective experience of the millions that participated in the war. And there was this brutal process of spatial transformation of vast areas. And that was a brutal transformation of functions of technology, use of technologies. This autocratic modus operandi imposed upon millions of the war participants exerted a significant impact on the further development of space planning and designing, and became another unobserved in time outcome of the World War I. Post-war works of artists and architects unfortunately resembled prior planned stages of an attack on the existing status quo. An order from a superior replaced negotiations and consensus. A manifesto replaced the treatise, and result, the only true trends in art and architecture were created, which often later formed integral parts of the fostering then totalitarian system. So this architecture became the object of oppression on the part of architects. They were gaslighting all references to history and historical form. Everything that was related to that was undermined and unappreciated. And in consequence, users of architects were at a loss analyzing this phenomenon. Torbjörn, a landscape writer, he wrote, "Man thinks that his new ideas will solve all the problems. The old world gets in his way and thus must disappear. The quicker, the better." so that the new world could replace it and prosper. So there were some overblown but obvious and exaggerated defects of historical architecture. The easiest way, it seemed, to go for even more avant-garde solutions, to develop the expression of form just for pure expression thereof and invent new and newer architecture on a weekly basis. But the complexity of the work is growing in parallel to the complexity of the design. So there are relations with the status quo and ever-changing environment. So it seems that there are too many variables, usually too many variables that can be possibly taken into account. But then the negotiation procedures can be supplemented by negotiations. All redundant, non-measurable elements were rejected, or procedures were bypassed, and the time needed for critical analysis of the actual time of creating a building environment was measured. Avant-garde architecture, defined on the basis of anachronic criteria, stopped to be the carrier of progress and development. And now, when the society changes and has many different layers, that trend creates various needs and demands. And there are some distinctive features of character. To build an approximate image, we need to separate them and connect them as dots, as we connect dots in a picture. Avant-garde creators, they did not want to be in contact with the environment. They were focused on an object detached from the environment, and with that alienation they could prosper and go for variety. And that involved psychologists, activists. Numerous arguments were voiced by them, like Stephen Hall and Gale. They postulated the recovery of our diversity as they spot opportunity in hybridism of functions of public space and buildings they created. So they wanted to take into account only basic behaviors, because modern architects' language is rich enough to engage into a dialogue with surroundings with no resort to any historical forms. And participatory forms introduced by Ralph Erskine and Knoll allow architects to precisely define true needs. Here, the designer has all senses, like smells, textures, sounds, and tastes felt during regular movements along various spatial layers that form a special feeling of a place. And thus Dreieck in Zurich may be proud of attaining a similar variety of combined forms and places co-created by them. They became responsible co-op inhabitants. So thus Dreieck, inhabitants, residents, they are modest officials, and they imprisoned architects in a mesh used for in the construction industry, and they kept them there, accusing them of being tomb diggers, because they accused architects of wanting to destroy this location. Thus, the defense involved mysterious disappearance of architectural models of this area, but that has never been proven that these were the local residents that were the perpetrators here. So the buildings here, they were adapted for new needs, and they were designed to complete the quarter while ensuring its open, porous structure. In turn, in Sankt-Fabrik, which restored the former spatial structure of former manufacturing coffins, included some spaces that have some joint alleys and walkways and passages. Sargfabrik and the Dreieck designs had a functional layout adapted to the needs of various social and age groups, from young people through children and seniors, to mentally and physically impaired. In Sargfabrik, there are 2 residential units for the refugees and a nursery school where native speakers facilitate the acquisition of language by non-German speaking children. The formula is supplemented with cultural and educational activities for the local communities. This represents another aspect of the network of interconnections. At the same time, it is also the form of sharing and cohabitating space. And here, this formula is gradually expanding according to the assumptions of the authors of Manifest für eine Architektur der Cohabitation. Architectural facilities can be cohabitated by people and also by other living organisms. Thomas E. Hau, Wolfgang Weiser, and Marc Fron define architecture of cohabitation facilities as created by man and inclusive, suitable for animals other than people, perceived as a group of users and inhabitants. Triumphant domination of architecture over the landscape that was so heavily criticized by Adolf Loos has transformed into activities clearly in conflict with nature. So these are clearly design actions which lead to the architecture which builds and shapes the coexistence of humans and animals. The need to defend of the existing biotope through construction requires proper protection. So deep changes in the approach to every single stage of planning. So technology of building completion through supplying them with national energy sources. Only few buildings which meet the criteria of the trend have been completed in compliance with such changes proposed to the design process. When designing Bosco Verticale, home for trees, since also houses humans and birds, Stefano Boeri collaborated with botanists and ethologists who selected elements of the ecosystem, including trees. Over 800 trees were located on the 2 towers, and they were adapted to the conditions of their planting areas. When designing Host and Nectar Garden building in Colombia, Camilo Garcia and Diego Barajas from Jusas Architektury experimented with proper selection of species of birds, insects, and planned in cooperation with ethologists, ornithologists, and flora experts in Colombia. In effect, they have created a unique urban ecosystem of trees and vines, with butterflies and other insects attracted to it, and a habitat of other animals and birds. The ecosystem itself has extended its network of biological corridors, and it offers a microclimate and attracts women that design of clothing and promotes the local culture. So this is the area for the needs of fashion designing, clothing manufacturing, and housing for the people concerned. So the experience that comes from developing this small-scale project proved useful in a larger-scale Tic-Tac 2 project of VXM Architects Studio. This is a Dutch studio that designed the building like that. This is going to be a part of a new urban planning project, which is aimed at introducing residential functions to Zuidas, an office area in Amsterdam, which is quite homogeneous. The facade of the building, the elevation of the building, has been designed to accommodate both solar panels and nesting boxes and hollows for birds and bats. Watered from balconies and the roof, blooming and fruit-bearing vines provide animals with shelter and feed. The building is thus something more than a still matter. It forms part and fosters components of the evolving urban ecosystems. The example of tic-tac-toe demonstrates a change a dramatic change in designing elevation. Elevation has become some kind of active coating that can generate energy, recover water, react to changes. Panels installed on the facade of the CH2 office building in Melbourne are relatively small and feature a specific arrangement of Louvre sections as a result of the building gains. In Sharifa House, entire mobile modules are installed and they can convert a winter house into a summer house. The body blocks become more porous, they can unexpectedly move forward and backwards in various directions to form arcades, recessed terraces, bay windows, loggias and balconies. The building facade ceases to function as a shield only, but plays an active role of a social elevation connecting the building interior with the public space. Then it contributes to the larger space diversity and fosters initiation and activation of human contact. So such approach to architectural elements and the condensation of urban tissue activates further components of a building and furnishes the form of a multifaceted perspective. The room is no longer technical space on the fifth elevation, but it has become an additional building floor. So it has been given the function of a garden, but also like a shower or shower school roof. It is a natural reserve, a local natural reserve, or a vegetable plot, or a sport grounds, or it could be a car park, like in Copenhagen, Nordhaven, or in Vienna in Seestadt Aspern. Adopting the existing buildings or existing facility is equally important as building new ones. When facing the crisis that spreads over all aspects of our life, such actions are particularly important. They can take the form of diverse interventions into some residue areas, terraces, balconies. So these are micro-interventions that introduce small elements of architecture or nature to improve the, or generally speaking, quality of urban environment. And here, the currently pending conversion of the Crown Estate in London, which would be transformed into a green corridor connecting Regent's Park and St. James Park, and increased biodiversity, fully meets the criteria of the micro-intervention. Then we have the former factory building in Neu-Oerlikon in Zurich to a vine and creeper garden, MFO Park. The former ammunition factory has been transformed into multi-layered green public space. So the underlying idea of the MFO Park project was not only to utilize every element of the production hall, glass powder was used in playgrounds, but also to select plants that they could grow freely with no human interventions. Vine and creepers gradually overgrow the steel structure, hide its shape and change the way the plants function. The hull gets gradually naturalized and becomes a starting point for an ecosystem in this part of Zurich. As in the MFO Park, the process has been initiated and moderated by man. But in justified cases, undertaking no action and leaving the architecture for a facility to its own devices makes much more sense, so that it can be transformed into a unique urban biotope characterized with exceptional ability to regenerate to be resilient to climate changes. The process was observed in Józef-Szycy Stadium in Poznań. Over not more than 20 years, as you can see on the slide, it has become the natural habitat of endemic plants and wildlife species. The biotope has been developing here without any human intervention and is gradually merging with the southern greenery wedge in Poznań. But this greenery wedge has been massively cut out by developers in Poznań, so this is why it's so important, so that the stadium remains intact without any human intervention. And finally, what I wanted to show is the factor of the fast response. It is not included in the article, but the most recent events imposed a very high importance on it. So refugee crisis require a faster response. So it's not about designing costly prototypes like a refugee center, but it's about taking actions similar to actions of Shigeru Ban or to actions taken by foundations like Habitat for Humanity, Diversity. Very many organizations with beautiful names. So they require use of local materials on the basis of simple local tools, and they are fueled on the experience of contextualism and architecture without architects. Synergy of all these experiences may have an impact on the continuation of architecture. It is also about search for the right solutions, so that buzzword is evolution of designs. Nowadays, such attitude seems more avant-garde than revolutionary change of everything and everyone. Has the avant-garde artists lost their battle against the bourgeois affirmation of life? Well, they've been both transformed. Revolutionists soon started to work for government authorities and big corps, and Philistines have learned how to defend their lifestyle, sometimes resorting to illegal methods, and they had to learn how to stand up for the ideas of rationality, morality, and their proper influence on young, faltering souls. And let me close with that by quoting Thomas Mann and one of his works. Thank you.